Member of Congress is about to tell us why all lawmakers should. Plus, a new lesson plan for Texas, the big decision still pending for Donald Trump, and the echoes of Abigail, the one general who's suddenly not receiving a promotion. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
This document and this effort isn't about accountability today. It's about understanding. And I would also add that, as I said to Ed, the review process isn't over.
You want to read that? Not about accountability. That is what the White House said in April 2023 after the State Department released a blistering report on the botched 2021 military withdrawal from Afghanistan. But tonight, is accountability now here? Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. You might remember this image right here, which you can attach well more than 1,000 words to. The last U.S. troop leaving Afghanistan, August 30th, 2021. Army Major General Chris Donahue, then the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, boarding a C-17 transport plane. Now, the military and the country with major questions at the time of that, as 4 days prior, a suicide bomber killed 13 U.S. troops at Kabul's main airport. Now, fast forward to last evening, Washington, the United States Senate. A sizable group of military officers were promoted by the Senate, except for one, that last leader on the ground. Our Joe Khalil, the first to report on who is blocking that promotion, and we begin tonight with Joe on what he's learned. Joe, there are lots of layers to this one. First off, lay out why the Senate did what it did last night and how it all came about.
Yeah, so it became pretty clear last night that the Senate, they usually do this. They sort of do promotions for the military in bulk. So hundreds of military officers getting a promotion in one fell swoop, except for one. One was blocked, as you mentioned, Chris Donahue. And we learned exclusively here at NewsNation that it was Senator Markwayne Mullin that ultimately blocked him from getting his promotion. We don't know.
Republican from Oklahoma.
Republican senator from Oklahoma, a strong Trump ally. We don't exactly know why he did that because he has not been able to respond to our requests for comment. We've reached out, but what we can tell you is that, again, senators individually have this right. 1 out of 100 senators can pick out a military promotion or several and decide to hold it. That's what happened in this case.
As far as we know, no one ever fired due to the botched withdrawal in Afghanistan. In fact, folks have been promoted over time. It begs the question, Joe, we showed that image, right? One person. This wasn't the responsibility you would think of just one person. So is this step one in what's about to come down the line potentially?
Well, again, it's sort of impossible to answer at this point. And again, we would love to talk to Senator Markwayne Mullin about this. What we can tell you is on the campaign trail, what we've heard from President-elect Trump is that several people, he says, who were involved in calling the shots toward the end of the withdrawal from Afghanistan are going to be held accountable. We haven't gotten much clarity on exactly what that means. Is this step one in that? Again, not clear. Very well, maybe. We just don't have the reporting to confirm that just yet.
Here's what the Pentagon told us. They said, quote, of course, because we reached out to the Pentagon, they said of Donahue, his appointment comes at an extremely critical time in the European region. We urge the Senate to confirm all of our highly qualified nominees. Holds on our nominees undermine our military readiness.
And that is the same thing that we heard from the Pentagon actually back when Senator Tuberville did the same thing.
He was doing this nonstop.
It was several hundred that he was actually blocking. And the Pentagon said this affects our military readiness. They're saying the same thing now, even though it's just one officer rather than others. Now, I've heard several things about General Donahue. Some are very high on him as an individual. Again, the involvement with the withdrawal, it does beg the question. We haven't seen anybody personally be held accountable for this.
He's up for a 4-star general promotion too, right?
Yeah.
And I believe there's only something like it's a rare class.
Yeah.
Only 40 or so 4-star generals in this country. Pete Hegseth is going to be the incoming defense secretary. Here's what he said before the election. He said, quote, "You got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense." You have to wonder, again, if this is just step one and where this goes as Donald Trump has talked about accountability. Yeah. The White House last year said now's not the time, but it certainly seems like there was at least one step towards possible accountability last night.
Yeah, and we have to just figure out, again, what the motivation was here. Right. We'd love to continue to report this and see what we can get.
Good point. Our Joe Kay, live for us. Joe, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, meantime, Donald Trump still needs to announce some key picks as he heads into the weekend. Our Robert Sherman, live for us once again out at Transition headquarters in Palm Beach, Florida for us this evening. Robert?
Hey there, Blake. And Treasury Secretary remaining top of mind here tonight as the president-elect is laser focused on picking the right candidate for that job. And that list of potential contenders, well, in the last week, it has grown, not narrowed. You look at this list of names here that we've been able to see. Mark Rowan, Kevin Warsh, Scott Bessent, and Senator Bill Hagerty still in consideration for the job. But there is a possible door number 3 that's being floated. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, one option that's on the table is move Kevin Warsh into that position, and then when Jerome Powell's term with the Federal Reserve ends, slot him into that, as Warsh is a former member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Another position of note, FBI director. There were some rumblings that Mike Rogers might be in contention for that job, but some criticized him as being a bit too establishment for that position. Dan Scavino, a senior advisor to the president-elect, throwing some cold water on that, saying Mr. Trump has, quote, never given it a thought and that it is not happening. And then one more position to make note of here. Our partners over at The Hill reporting, citing a source with knowledge of the matter, that Kelly Loeffler looks like she's in good position to get the job of Secretary of Agriculture, the former senator from Georgia. No formal announcement has come down on that, however, so far this evening. Blake?
Robert Sherman live for us in Florida once again. Robert, thank you. So in 59 days, President-elect Donald Trump will be back in the Oval Office, and Republicans will control Congress, both the Senate and the House. Now, Republicans believe they have a clear mandate after their election sweep. Democrats are already talking about ways to try to thwart Donald Trump. But one Republican now has a new idea. Lower the temperature just a bit by having members of Congress sleep in their offices. The Georgia Congressman, Buddy Carter, writing in a recent op-ed the following, saying, quote, I submit that Congress would be more effective if every member slept in their office because there is inherent value in getting to know people across the aisle as people rather than as just the opposition. And the congressman from the state of Georgia joins us live. Congressman Carter, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it, sir. You sleep in your office already. Tell me about it and why you do that.
I sleep in my office, quite honestly, because not necessarily to save money, but just the convenience of it. I mean, look, I'm a healthcare professional, I'm a pharmacist by profession. But whenever there's an issue that is outside of my area of study, I have to study. And I spend every night probably an hour and a half just reading over things, learning about things. And that's why it's so convenient for me instead of fighting traffic in Washington, D.C. or whatever. Yeah, but I really do think it is a way for us to build up bipartisanship and to build up camaraderie. It's a special. There are a group of us. I'm not the only one who does it. There's probably 40, 50 of us.
Yeah, there's a decent-sized chunk of Congress, and we're showing your office right now in that sort of cot or rollaway bed. But square this for me, Congressman, because I hear you talk about bipartisanship, and my gosh, do we need bipartisanship in this town and across this country, really? But Republicans believe they have a mandate. So how do you get to bipartisanship with Republicans saying, you know what, we control the White House, we control the House, we control the Senate, it's go time?
Oh, that's a good question. But at the same time, I think Democrats realize that as well. We do feel like we have a mandate. I think President Trump feels like he has a mandate. And it's clear what we need to do. We need to make sure that we're improving our economy. We need to make sure that we're unleashing American energy. We need to make sure that we're securing our border. We need to make sure that we're once again respected on the world stage. All of those things are extremely important. But I don't think that Democrats necessarily disagree with a lot of those things. Maybe there's a different way they think we should go about it, but I think that they understand, too, the American people have spoken, and spoken loud and clear.
You know, you talk about the camaraderie in the gym, for example, right? How you go down there and you work out in the Capitol complex. There's a gym, and you talk about in your op-ed how you work out next to Republicans and Democrats. Congressman, this was the least productive Congress, if not the least, one of the least productive Congresses of all time. And I think there might be some folks who read the op-ed who say, wow, that's nice. I'd like to see that or hear that the members of Congress sort of work with each other. But you know what? And I say this respectfully, I really don't care. Just get stuff done. What would you say to that line of questioning?
Well, this is the way that we can get things done. I use the example of my good friend Josh Gothard, who I have sponsored and co-sponsored a number of bills with, a number of bipartisan bills, and I do work across the aisle. We do work across the aisle. I serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I would submit to you that the Energy and Commerce Committee is the most bipartisan committee in Congress. We work together, particularly in health care, because when it comes down to it for health care, we all want the same thing, whether you're Republican or Democrat. You want accessible, affordable, quality health care. We all work toward that common goal. I know that we may have different ways to get there, but we all want to get to that goal.
Congressman Carter, you've written this op-ed, and there's a little bit of whispering going on here in Washington and across Georgia that you might want to be Senator Carter. Where are you right now, Congressman, in potentially running for senator in 2026 against John Ossoff, who's the Democrat?
Well, certainly that should be a Republican seat. Let's make that clear. And I'm looking forward to having a Republican nominee who's going to take back that seat. But I will tell you that I'm honored to represent the people of the 1st Congressional District. I've just been reelected. I'm excited. The shine has not worn off for me in Washington, D.C. I'm still excited every time I go back up there.
I don't hear a no there, Congressman.
We'll see what God has got in plan here.
Does it matter if Governor Kemp runs, if he's in, you're out?
Well, I certainly feel like Governor Kemp would be a great candidate, and certainly he'll clear the field in the Republican primary if he runs.
Okay. Congressman Buddy Carter from the state of Georgia, if you couldn't tell by that football there behind him. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill this evening. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
All right. Meantime, back here in Washington, the Capitol gets ready for DOGE. That is the Department of Government Efficiency. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have new partners up on Capitol Hill who are now tasked with working with them to help cut government waste. The Republican Congresswoman from Georgia, by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene, is now set to lead the House subcommittee dedicated to DOGE in the next Congress. Our partners at thehill.com report that the Congresswoman has already met with members of the DOGE team, including Vivek Ramaswamy. The NewsNation reports the Senate DOGE caucus is also in the works, potentially headed by the Iowa Republican, the Senator Joni Ernst. Details there on that caucus are fluid. Still to come here from the Hill on this Friday evening, President-elect Trump promises mass deportations of illegal immigrants when he takes office. But how would you track them down? Plus, another state following the footsteps of Oklahoma. Will the Bible be taught in public schools? Did you see what happened in the state of Texas today? And what's on President Biden's to-do list before he leaves office? Lots of spending, possibly. Hello from Washington. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. This is the center of politics, and we're back in 4. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Tonight, as the state of Texas is consumed by Friday night lights and state football playoffs, there's another focus in schools, the Bible. The Texas State Board of Education voting 8-7 to approve Bible curriculum as an option for kindergarten through the 5th grade. Though the schools aren't required to enforce Bible-based lessons, they will receive extra funding if they do. Now, Oklahoma recently paved the way, mandating the Bible in schools for grades 5 through 12. The top educator in that state defended the idea, telling me it should happen nationwide.
You have to have it in the classrooms. We will ensure that history is taught in every class. That means kids will know American exceptionalism. That means kids will know the role that faith played. We will be unapologetic about that here in Oklahoma. We want to make sure that every student knows the role that the Bible played in American history.
All right, so that what was going on in Oklahoma, and then some moves in Texas tonight. Joining us now, Dr. Audrey Young, who sits on the Texas State Board of Education, representing parts of the greater Houston and southeastern parts of the state. She voted yes earlier today. Dr. Young, thanks for joining us here on the Hill.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me why you voted the way you did and why this was so split among the group there in Texas.
I voted because I believe in teaching American principles, and I believe that the literacy is a critical juncture at this time across our nation. And we want to ensure that the students are exposed to the most referenced. And so I chose to ensure that our students who are working through the literacy of all of our nation, but well within the state of Texas, are learning what they need to learn in order to be an important part of knowing the history of America and the history of how our nation was founded.
So I referenced Oklahoma, right? Because you know what's going on across the Red River there in Oklahoma. And what's happening with the Bible being mandated in classes. Earlier this week as well, I had Senator Markwayne Mullin from the state of Oklahoma on the show, and he pushed back on the idea of this. I want you to listen to what he said, and I'll get your reaction on the other side.
I think it's a slippery slope when you put it in the hands of teachers that may not be believers, that's going to be teaching the word that can easily be taken out of context. So if the state is going to require that, then the state should also be required that it's taught by someone that graduated from seminary school.
Do you understand the point there? It's essentially like saying, I don't really want a science teacher teaching English if they're not, if that's sort of not what they do every single day. What about that argument from the senator?
Would you equate it with like that if you don't have your own child, you shouldn't be teaching children? And that would be the question that I would ask.
Say that again?
So, I'm sorry?
Say that again? No, he was basically saying, look, if you don't have the background to teach this, you shouldn't be teaching it. Not that if the Bible should or shouldn't be in the class. It's just a different perspective of maybe they're not, maybe teachers in public schools, the many thousands of them, have the background to teach this.
Yes, and I don't agree with his viewpoint. I do think that we're in the curriculum that we adopted today. It is stories that come from the Bible. We are not teaching the Bible. And that might be the difference between what he is speaking to and what has happened today in the state of Texas.
Do you believe the state should take the next step and do what Oklahoma is doing, which is to mandate Bibles in the classroom?
That is not within the purview of the State Board of Education. Thank you for asking me that question. But we do have the 89th legislature coming through. And so I don't have any doubt that it will be part of what we will see coming up very shortly in the state of Texas.
And that would happen when?
Starts in January.
Starts in January. Okay. All right. We'll see where it goes. Dr. Audrey Young, who was a part of the vote there today down there in the Lone Star State, joining us here on the Hill. I thank you for your time. Appreciate you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You got it. All right. Meantime, some breaking news here out of Washington and down in the state of Florida as President-elect Trump now announcing that man right there, Scott Bessent, as his selection to be the next Treasury Secretary. Now, Bessent is a longtime hedge fund executive and the founder of Key Square Group and has been a key advisor to the president-elect on economic policy. Other finalists included the Apollo Group CEO Mark Rowan, the former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh, and the senator from the state of Tennessee, Bill Haggerty. But tonight, someone who has been by Donald Trump's side in the recent months now gets the top economic job here in Washington, Scott Bessent, to be nominated as the Treasury Secretary. Still much more ahead here on the Hill. Did the president-elect just catch a big legal break? Today, a judge pausing the sentencing in his hush money case in New York. So what comes next? And how will the transition, or the administration rather, round up illegal immigrants all over the country by the millions? The former chief of the Border Patrol, really Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, joins us live here in studio. And we'll get a response from a top Democrat on one of the biggest committees here in Washington as well. We're back in 4.
Remarkable women from across the country. 125 trailblazers will be honored with a chance to win $25,000 for the nonprofit of their choice. Nominations open through December 20th. Go to newsnationnow.com to enter a remarkable woman today.
All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. President-elect Donald Trump's New York hush money trial will not proceed as planned. So what happens now? Our Kelly Meyer is here with that. And what else is happening here in the Capitol? Hello, Kelly.
Hey there, Blake, and happy Friday. A good end to the week for President-elect Donald Trump as well. The New York City judge overseeing his hush money trial saying today there would be no sentencing next week as previously scheduled. Trump's team today calling it a, quote, decisive win for Trump. Judge Juan Marchand asking Trump's team to file its motion to dismiss by December 2nd. Prosecutors in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office will have until December 9th to respond. And the Manhattan DA's office opposes the bid to throw it out, but they don't object to delaying it until after he leaves office in 2029. And what was Matt Gaetz doing hours after dropping out of the running to be America's Attorney General? Having a martini. His wife, Ginger, posting this photo on X with the caption, "Unemployment has never looked so good." Gaetz confirming that himself today, that he will not be rejoining Congress, but teasing another post could be in his future, or storyteller maybe. Gaetz is now on the personalized video platform Cameo. The company's CEO telling News Nation, quote, "We're excited to have him on the platform." And my favorite end to the week, it's officially Christmas in the Capitol. There was even some snow out there today. The Capitol Christmas tree arriving today. The 80-foot spruce from Alaska will be hoisted up on the West Lawn, a tradition dating back 60 years. The tree is one of the tallest in the tradition's history. And the White House Christmas tree is making its way to 1600 Pennsylvania, to the Blue Room from Western North Carolina, which was the area hit hard by Hurricane Helene. The Cartner family knew they would be supplying the White House its official tree since last year, but it took on new meaning, Blake, after Helene. And one of 3 brothers who run the Avery County farm said the Fraser fir can only be grown in the counties affected by the storm, likening the resolve to the residents' resiliency following the storm.
I love to hear that in the state of North Carolina there, what happened. You got my attention, though, on Wrangell, Alaska.
Yes.
That's where the Capitol tree is from?
Yes, exactly.
So I just did Washington, D.C. to Wrangell, Alaska. Here's what you got to do. You go through Juneau, then it looks like you go through British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, North Dakota, Minnesota. Where else am I going? Wisconsin, Illinois, little Indianapolis, Ohio, through PA. And then bang, here you are.
Yeah, and they said it wasn't a sleigh ride, Blake. It wasn't quite that easy.
3 days and 11 hours if you were to drive through straight. That's 83 hours. By the way, my phone also tells me there's a severe weather warning in British Columbia for the folks there.
My goodness. Okay.
Anyways, all right.
Well, thank you.
All the dedication to get it here. Kelly Meyer.
Exactly.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Meantime, mayors in Democratic cities continue to respond to President-elect Trump's mass deportation plan. In Denver today, for example, Mike Johnston, the mayor there, pledging to resist Trump's policies. Johnston expressing confidence in the city's population by comparing the resistance to the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests in China. Now, nearly 1,000 miles away in the Windy City, Mayor Brandon Johnson says Chicago will remain a sanctuary city, despite the president-elect's plans. But across the aisle, Republicans are showing support. For example, the Oklahoma governor, Kevin Stitt, saying he would help deport illegal immigrants who entered his state. Joining me now, Ron Vitiello, the former chief of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, at one point during the Trump administration first go-around. Hello, sir.
How you doing?
Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right, so Trump controls the federal government, right? Has purview over the federal government. The governors, the mayors, they control the states, the cities, the counties, the townships, you name it. What happens if Trump says we're going to do this, and they say, we're not going to help you do that?
Well, they don't have to help.
Right. So that's why I'm wondering, how all that plays out.
Well, the law is on the president's side in regards to the courts have ruled that federal law has supremacy in our
immigration.
World, in immigration specifically.
Right.
Very good. And so there are people out right now, officers, men and women of ICE, who are out looking for people who are fugitives from immigration court, threats to public safety that are in the country illegally or have done something to make them deportable. So this activity occurs with or without the help of places like Chicago and Denver.
So you use the word help, right? Is it going to be easier in some states, for lack of a better term, because some states will do what or not will do, but support the president's plans, whereas others clearly don't?
Yeah, remember the electoral map broken down by county? Most of them are red. County sheriffs have jurisdiction over law enforcement inside those counties. So you have 287G law on the books that was, I think, was built in like 92, which allows local jurisdictions to have trained officers help immigration agents on the ground in places that have those agreements. And so there's a way to do it without the help, without support of the local law enforcement, but it's much easier done. It's safer for the constituency.
Okay.
And then let's talk about sanctuary cities. What's the premise here? These are people who came to the United States, were not invited here, came without inspection against federal law, and then they broke another crime in their city or town. And so why are we protecting people who are afoul of the law, both federally and state and local?
What would you say? So Katie Hobbs is the Democratic governor in the border state of Arizona. She said this earlier today, and I'll get your reaction, or earlier this week, rather, and I'll get your reaction.
I am very hopeful that that partnership can continue and that the incoming administration will listen to not only my administration, but the experts here on the ground, the people that are doing the work about what is most needed and what we can continue to do that will be most helpful in securing our border.
She says her experts are the ones that are on the ground.
Well, state and local law enforcement, the reason the federal government has task forces with state and local participants is because they know the lay of the land better than federal agents in every
is she right there then?
Well, is it true that locals know the way to go? Yes. Is it also a detriment to her constituency that there are people among them that are in the country illegal and have committed other crimes? That's bad for her constituency as it is for border security across the board.
You know Donald Trump's immigration policy as well. As I mentioned, you were the head of ICE for about a year or so. What do you think the first day, week, month looks like?
Stop the leak at the border.
What do you mean by that? I mean, I know what you mean by that, but that's a pretty broad statement.
Solidify policies that allow people to have their due process in immigration court, but don't come in the country and be released in the United States. And that incentive where people come across the border illegally and then are released into cities and towns in the U.S.
Ron Vitiello, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Talk to you again soon. All right, joining me now is Congressman Glenn Ivey, a Democrat from just down the road, state of Maryland, member of the Homeland Security Committee. Hello, Congressman.
How you doing?
Nice to see you in person. We normally do this virtually because of your schedule.
I thought it was your schedule.
Well, you're the member of Congress. So polling showed that Americans viewed the wall favorably, viewed mass deportations favorably. Donald Trump wins the White House. You sort of hear there what Katie Hobbs says. We see what Democratic mayors and governors are saying. Do you think Democrats have learned what the American public told them on November 5th as it relates to immigration?
Well, I didn't catch all of what she said, but a couple things. One is the bipartisan Senate bill should have passed. And there were House Democrats like me that wanted it to be brought up so we could have voted on it then.
Yeah.
On this particular issue, when I was a local prosecutor and we had people who were in some instances here illegally, but they were witnesses to a crime, for example, sometimes the criminals would say, if you come forward, you're going to get deported, and they'll separate you from your children. So we actually had problems getting witnesses to come forward to testify in cases. Sometimes they were victims of crimes. Domestic violence was another big scenario.
So you don't think deportations could, if I hear you right, happen at the scale that Donald Trump wants them to?
Well, that's definitely true. But even at the lower scale, when I was in office 20 years ago, it was an issue. I'll give you another example. You got a homicide prosecution coming up, and you send your detectives out to get your witness. Well, he's been deported. And so I'm like, well, how are we going to move forward with this case? Because there wasn't coordination between the federal deportation piece and the
What about the greater safety, though? I mean, the American people did speak on immigration.
I think, like I said, I think House Democrats, like me, agreed that we should try and do something to move forward with it. But Donald Trump blocked the bipartisan Senate bill for this reason, so he could win the presidency. And on top of that, we want to make sure that we add additional funds so we can do the kinds of stuff they're talking about. I don't know where the money's going to come from for the type of activities he's talking about.
Sitting in that very chair earlier this week was Martin O'Malley. You know him. He's from your home state. Yeah. Former governor of Maryland, former presidential candidate. He wants to be the next head of the DNC as Democrats kind of do a little soul searching here of what's next. Here's what he told me, and I'll get your reaction on after that.
I've never particularly thought that the border wall was anything more than a campaign symbol. I think there's other ways that you can secure a border.
So that's someone who's running to be the head of the DNC. Do you think that needs to be the message coming out of Democrats going forward?
Oh, let me say this. When I went down to the border to look at the wall in Texas, down in Rio Grande, he's right. I mean, you had, the wall stopped at one side of the road and started on the other side of the road.
So you think it's just a symbol?
It's largely symbolic. It's also enormously expensive.
Do you think it works?
No.
I don't think it works.
I mean, you can already see where they cut the holes in the wall to get through or go underneath it. I don't think there's any real trick there. What you really need are more border agents so that when they apprehend them, they can figure out whether they get to stay or go right there. And then you need more judges to handle the cases. So we got a multi-year backlog. As long as you don't deal with that, there's going to be a problem.
You said earlier this year that we are neglecting, you're on the Homeland Security Committee in the House, that we are neglecting cyber. And we saw down the stretch of the presidential campaign that China was hacking, according to the FBI, telecom systems. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Democrats as well were targeted. What do you think the Trump administration should do on cyber as it relates to China? Well, because that's not going away anytime soon.
No, definitely not. And there are other cyber issues, too, especially the military piece. So if you look at some of the combat issues that are going on in Ukraine and in Gaza, there's new levels of warfare that you're going to require us to step it up, whether it's drones or other types of technology. Cyber is one of those, and I think we really need to move forward with it. It's going to take additional investment. And I think R&D needs to happen. We need to make sure the private sector keeps working on these things, too. But I'm in favor of a strong public-private partnership.
All right. Congressman Glenn Ivey, got to leave it there. Thank you, sir.
Good to see you.
Appreciate your time. Nice to see you.
My pleasure.
Yep. All right. Still to come here on the Hill. A little bit of breaking news if you just joined us. President-elect Trump naming his Secretary of the Treasury. So who is Chris Besson? We'll dig into it. Also, don't forget to download the NewsNation. Scott Besson, excuse me. We're catching up here, as the congressman laughs at me. Scott Besson for Treasury. By the way, NewsNation Now, the app. Download it. The full panel, other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. Loud it.
This election, NewsNation told it to you straight.
NewsNation had the best coverage.
We called the race first.
Donald Trump will be our next president.
Trust NewsNation to deliver the story like no one else. NewsNation is news for all America.
Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation, and a little bit of news on this Friday evening. President-elect Donald Trump expected to nominate Scott Besson as the Treasury Secretary, a source confirms to NewsNation. Now, Besson is a longtime hedge fund executive and the founder of Key Square Group, and he's been a key advisor to the president-elect on economic policy in the recent months. Other finalists included Apollo Group CEO Mark Rowan, the former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh, and Senator Bill Hagerty from Tennessee. Full panel here with me now. Lance Trover is a Republican strategist. Kelly Meyer, Julia Manchester, you know them both. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor as well. Hello to you all. Thanks for hanging with me on a Friday night here.
Hello. Happy Friday.
It snowed in D.C. and it's chilly in the studio, but let's get to it.
We're from Chicago. That wasn't
snow. You're good. You're good.
That wasn't snow.
Scott Besson, Lance, as the Treasury Secretary pick. This is interesting because Donald Trump wants the market to go up and to the right. The market will love Scott Besson and go up and to the right on this news. He also wants lots of tariffs, and the market does not like that. And that seemed to be a little bit of square peg, round hole. Why do you think he landed on Besson?
I think he's a qualified guy. I look at the entire Trump transition over the last couple of weeks. We were talking about this backstage that, we've had a stumble with Matt Gaetz, obviously, this week. But I think if you look at this period, they have a good operation going on there. We're at 15, 16 nominations just in the last 2 weeks. I think that speaks volumes about the operational aspects. The campaign was very good, operationally run. It's really good to see that this is going smoothly into the January 20th election.
Smooth? You believe
inauguration.
You believe all this is smooth?
I think they had a bump with Matt Gaetz, absolutely. But in terms of the rollout and behind-the-scenes operations, you have 15, 16 nominations in 2 weeks since Election Day. That tells me they are moving forward at a good clip.
Here's what I hear, Scott, or I think we'll probably hear, is we'll hear Democrats say, whoa, Donald Trump and tariffs, right? Mm-hmm. Donald Trump, play the soundbite actually real quick, and then we'll get to it on the other side.
To me, the most beautiful word, and I've said this for the last couple of weeks, in the dictionary today, is the word tariff. this country can become rich with the proper use of tariffs.
So that was Trump on Joe Rogan a few weeks ago, Scott. President Biden kept every single tariff from Donald Trump in place. So yes, Trump is talking about more and a lot more, but the president from your party that just occupied the White House, I guess you could say, agreed with him a little bit.
Well, the tariffs, he kept those tariffs in place, but Donald Trump is talking about having twice, triple as many tariffs, which is inconsistent with the nominee. I also think if they've got these nominees because they haven't vetted these nominees, which is why 3 or 4 are going to have some problems. But the fact of the matter is, in order to have as many tariffs as Donald Trump, just from a macroeconomic standpoint, is you've got to be a self-producer so that those costs for those tariffs aren't passed on to the consumer, and they still criticize Biden.
Someone said that'd be a good thing.
And his economy.
A self-producer would be a good thing.
Okay, but you got to get there. You can't get there overnight.
The other part of this job, Julia, is the tax code's coming up for a rewrite. And I think at the end of the day, people are like, what's in my bank account? Am I paying more or less to Uncle Sam? And Scott Bessent's going to have a really big say.
Scott Bessent is likely going to be very much on board with Donald Trump, Senate Republicans, and really kind of extending those Trump tax cuts, bringing more tax cuts. I imagine this is going to be a hallmark of Trump's first year in office. So definitely look out for that.
This is what he'll do on, obviously, immigration and taxes on day one. And that's going to be a key player.
Absolutely, saying his favorite word is tariff. And as you mentioned, I was going to say, too, that Biden's kept those in place. But it's interesting what he does with China. We know that Biden was just meeting with Xi over the weekend. How they manage the competition as well as kind of put the pressure on China. That's going to be interesting for his pick. And again, I was just going to say it again shows the loyalty aspect of this for someone that's been so supportive of the MAGA movement.
All right. Meantime, tonight, speaking of the president, the current one, he is thanking his longtime supporters at a White House dinner happening right now. But away from the dinner table, there's a mad dash by the Biden team to spend whatever money it can before the end of the term. For example, as the Washington Post lays out today, there's some $46 billion available under 4 of the major bills passed while the president was president, still is. An administration official as well tells NewsNation. All right, so there's sort of 2 sides to this, right? At the end of the day, Joe Biden's the current president. Laws were passed. They can spend the money, but on the other side, Donald Trump can come in 59 days and Republicans can start going, this is done.
Well, you got to get the money out the door. The faster, the better, because once it's out the door, there's not a whole lot Donald Trump can do, but he's the president. And if Donald Trump was in the same position, they'd be trying to move these monies.
Both sides would be doing the same thing.
Exactly. It's just how Washington works.
Well, that's what we're seeing him do with the Ukraine funding. Sorry, to say that he's going to use the rest of the presidential drawdown authority, everything that's left to spend, he's going to spend it before he leaves office, in part because that's his promise to make sure Ukraine has everything they need, but also because Trump may not continue that support.
Like there was something the other day about taxes on methane emissions, right, that they're going forward with. And the point is, Lance, this is still the end of the Biden presidency, and they're going to try to handcuff the incoming Trump administration as much as they can.
So you hit the nail on the head for me. I mean, look, there's nothing the incoming president can do about spending the money that's been appropriated. They're going to put it out the door. They have every right to do that. He also said at that meeting the other day that he wanted to make the transition smooth and all that good stuff. So my question is, are they going to come in with a bunch of these executive orders that are just going to just jam up the works? The Trump campaign is going to have to come in, or the Trump operation is going to have to come in and undo a bunch of this stuff and cause a bunch of consternation. I'm guessing that's what they end up doing, but that's not exactly helping a smooth transition.
Well, and I think that's, what you're hearing from Republicans. I mean, I think there is the argument that, the country voted for President Trump. He won all 7 battleground states, won the popular vote. Biden comes in and does these executive orders. I think there's, some criticism there. So we'll see if that holds, but...
Well, this mandate the Republicans keep talking about isn't much of a mandate. I mean, the 7 states, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Those 7 blue wall states were lost by between 1% and 3%, which is exactly what the polling told us about those states. And so it's like a prize fight. The prize fighter won. The loser, you said it's a close fight. It was a close fight. They just didn't win states, and in the prize fight, they didn't win enough rounds.
So the reality is going forward, Joe Biden's going to do what he wants. Republicans are then going to have their shot. But think about that number, $46 billion with a B. Like we've been talking about, what are Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk going to do with eliminating this or cutting that? $46 billion is like a government agency, Julia. It's like no small amount of money.
Right, literally. And I mean, look, I'm wondering if this is going to get criticism, obviously, from Republicans going forward. But I think,
But they're going to spend this money to make America better again.
That's good. All right. We'll leave it there. By the way, if you're driving to Thanksgiving dinner this year, the meal may cost you less. Some good news here. The average cost of Thanksgiving dinner for 10 people this year, down 5% from 2023 to an average of $58. Thanksgiving turkey, 6% less than last year. All right. But if you like cranberries with your turkey, they're up 12%. Good news about your dessert, though. Pumpkin pie mix, down almost 7%. All right, coming up. Before you go a little gobble gobble, this Sunday, Chris Steyerwalt hosts the Hill Sunday here on News Nation. Chris will be talking to the Republican congressman from Nebraska, Don Bacon, one of the more interesting races that happened this cycle. He will also be talking to one of the incoming members on the Democratic side as well. Be sure to watch the Hill Sunday, 10 o'clock Eastern, right here on News Nation. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hope you have a nice weekend. But before we go, did you know that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, do they think like Donald Trump? They do on one issue. I will explain it to you on the other side and take it up with Leland Vitter, host of On Balance. Stay with us. All right, so since when are the Democratic senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on the same political side as Donald Trump? When it comes to credit cards. Warren responding on X to a claim that she would back a 10% interest rate cap, saying, if Donald Trump really wants to take on the credit card industry, then count me in. President-elect Trump's first floated the idea on capping credit card interest rates out on the campaign trail. And the former head of the CFPB, our Mick Mulvaney, said this at the time.
I'm not sure why he's complaining that Kamala Harris is stealing his ideas on taxes on tips and that he's stealing Elizabeth Warren's ideas on how to handle credit cards. And where's my camera? My camera's there. Mr. President, please stop talking to the people or taking advice from the people who tell you to out-Democrat the Democrats. Republicans always lose doing that. This is a terrible, terrible piece of policy.
Joining me now, Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. I think you'll probably have a lot of conservatives say, what's he doing there siding with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren?
Anybody who cares about working class Americans will tell you that one of the worst things you can do for them is cap credit card rates.